folks, so today's demo is going to be a larger coil built pot. It is something that needs to be made in 2 stages, so the video will cut later and I'll compile them, but there will be time in between. So just so you know in advance, this is something that is a little bit more ambitious and takes some more time than some of our other projects demoed on here. This was requested, so if you have something that you specifically want to see, just send us a direct message and hopefully we can make that happen for you, especially if you have like eager questions or anything that you've been curious about having a demo on. I would love to try to explore that and give you that information. So today you will need clay in a larger amount. You will want something that will help the clay from not sticking to the table. If you have a banding wheel, it's preferred, but I don't have that at home, so I'm just working off my table and dealing with it. But if you have a banding wheel, you should definitely use it because they're awesome. A rib tool and serrated rib, at least for this part of the demo. So the first thing you're going to do is create your base of your planter. So I'm going to just slice off a decent chunk of clay, and this is a stoneware, and I'm just going to kind of pinch it out. This is straight from the block, so I don't have to worry too much about wedging it before, because it should have been pressed through a pug mill. And this can be in any shape that you want. This can be a circular planter, it can be triangular, square. I'm gonna get a little bit more experimental because that's the fun of hand building, is that you don't need to make a circle, while the wheel often binds you to that. So if you love the circle, keep it classic. If you want something kind of fun and different, maybe do a different shape. So I'm gonna make mine rectangular, and right now I'm just kind of like flattening it out, and I'm working right onto this newsprint so that as I'm squishing clay onto it, and I'm going to be pressing clay on it more, it's not going to fuse right to the table. You can press or smack it down. You could even kind of throw a slab, but you're just slowly working it thinner. And I typically like to make it just a little bit thinner, like just about 1/4 inch or a little bit over that. Nothing too thin, because especially for a planter, you don't want it to be super fragile. It's nice to have a little bit thicker of a planter, and it will just help you from not having a weak and compromised base. So I'm just pressing this out, and if I wanted a particular shape that was like perfect, I can either kind of squish this in and make it closer to that shape, or I could cut it if I want something very, very particular. So now that we have our base, just make sure it's even. You want to kind of work it around so that there's no thick spots. And we're going to roll out some coils to start the base of our planter. I'm just going to cut off a piece. You can just peel it off, squish it off, whatever large chunk here. And I am just kind of squeezing it out into a longer rod. So just squeezing. And then we're gonna roll this into a coil. So for my coils, I start in the middle. I have my fingertips kind of flared and I'm working my way out. If your fingertips are flared, that's gonna keep it a little bit more consistent. And by dragging them out as you're slowly rolling, it's going to make that longer. You want to focus on even spots, so if you get a little thicker spot, just kind of work that thicker spot out. And then for this larger coil, I want to keep them thick. The thinner that I have them, the more I have to attach together. It's a little bit more vulnerable to stress, so you can make big coils. From here, I'm going to flatten this out and just kind of pound it. Because in this first base part, I'm attaching wet clay to wet clay, it does not need to be slip and scored. You just want to make sure that as you're pressing it down, you're really kind of lining it up. And once it's lined up, I'll go back on this gap here later. I'm going to make sure it aligns with the wall so that folks can see. Can't really tell there, but it's lined up like that. So it's not over it. I usually take my thumb and my pointer fingers and I'm just kind of pressing it down. It's very easy when you're starting your base as you're trying to make the coil meet the base to have it be a really thick spot. So just make sure you're pressing down pretty decently. Once it's there, I kind of peel this up and I'm pressing that into the coil again. This is going to make it less likely to kind of split off, and then I'm working my way back. So you can see right now, it's pretty messy. It does not need to be clean at this point. So don't worry too much about the aesthetic right now. You're just focusing on pinching to where there are no thin or thick spots. You're working your way to have an even wall that is about a 1/4 inch thick. Again, if I didn't have this newsprint here, the clay would just kind of stick right on there and totally be a pain in the butt. So I'm peeling this up to meet it. Later I'll kind of come back and smooth that out, but for now I'm just building this up. I'm going to make more coils, and my wire tool ran away from me. And for my first part here, I'm going to build coils up to where it's going to be a few inches tall. So once it gets past that few inches tall, it's going to start to be compromising its structure. So that's why it's going to be 2 parts today, is we need that second part to be a little bit firmer. So you'll let it set up and then work your way to making it taller. If I just kept adding coils and coils to be a larger pot, then it is going to get saggy and I'm more likely to get cracks in it or it to flop and slump in the kiln. So just make sure that you be patient with coil building. It's a pretty slow process to embrace, but it allows you to do so much more with clay and take on so much more shaping. So once I have this all the way around, I'm going to make it even and then add my second coil. So you don't want to add too much overlap on the sections that kind of meet each other, but you also don't want a gap so that it's weak there. So try your best to kind of even out the spots where those 2 coils are starting to attach. I'm going to build up 1 layer and then show you what to do next. When you're attaching your second one, you want it to overlap just a little bit. So they're not sitting right like that. They're sitting just a little past. Then you can kind of squish them together with light pressure and then squish up your coil to where they're evenly matching the other wall. If you have a thicker spot that you can feel, just pinch a little harder. If you have a thin spot, you can just take a tiny bit of clay on that spot, squish it on there, and work it until it is fully incorporated. So say I went all the way around, I'm gonna add my third coil and then I'll show you how to score it. So again, not right on top, but just a little bit overlap. And I'm pressing first this kind of bottom one onto the top, and then I'm coming back with the other side and pushing that one. Then they'll kind of overlap, meet, and have a more secure bond. Once that's securely bonded, then I'm going with more of the full kind of pads of my fingertips to really ensure that my walls are even. And I am kind of pinching the clay up as I go. Make sure that you have pretty flat. If you start to push them together or have your hands bowing out too much, that will bring it wider. So if they're bowing out, they'll start to flail out. If you're going in with your hands while you're pinching, it will bring it in. So just try your best at this point, if you want it to be pretty true to that form, to just have your fingers as straight up and flat as possible. So you can see I still have these little lines on there, and it's kind of lumpy. So it depends on your style and aesthetic for that, but I don't really want that. I want a pretty smooth pot. So I'm gonna go with my serrated rib and I'm gonna rough it up. So it's kind of like drywall. I'm starting from the bottom and I'm gonna go in multiple directions. I'm just gonna show you this side. And I would do this, you know, build up my walls all the way through and do this on all of the surface. I typically just do this on the outside, but if you want your inside to be really beautiful, you know, you can go ahead and do that on both sides, but it just depends on what you're going for. I'm gonna put soil in it anyway, so as long as it's smooth and compressed enough, it doesn't have to be the prettiest thing in the world. But once you've gone multiple directions, it should feel pretty even. You can do a little bit more pinching if you notice a spot that is still quite thick. But then once it's all has that texture, then you can take your either metal rib tool or silicone one and always make sure you have your backhand supporting, and you can smooth that off and it will look really, really nice and smooth once you go with this tool. Just make sure once you've gone a few swipes with it, you peel off this extra goo. If you just kind of keep tagging it along, it will get those goobers back onto your piece. So you're gonna do that all the way around and then let it set either until the afternoon or wrap it in plastic and let it set overnight, and then we're gonna build it up even higher. So I will show you that shortly.